So one of the things we were just talking about, we're getting a little bit more specific and granular now about certain tactics that I know I've either seen in the HEMA community from a tournament perspective, but also that I can sort of envision just knowing the sort of breadth of different weapons in our domain. So I'll give you a couple examples. Something that in the way that I tend to fence. So I'm coming from the German tradition. What I want to try to be able to do is find a way in and be able to sort of control the center as much as I can, so I can keep that momentum, right? Covering the line, staying safe, that's the priority. But at the same time, every time that I am staying safe, every movement can also potentially offend the other person. So there's always that sort of constant pressure if I can manage it. A difficult tactic to then deal with is if someone who knows that's coming and has good distance, obviously, but also even maybe a weapon that is really sort of optimized for keeping a person at bay, and throws like hand snipes or thrusts or something where they can throw those things and harry me as I'm coming in, and I haven't gotten a clean entry yet, and they can just keep that distance kind of going backwards. So that's one scenario of like, kind of retreating by keeping someone at bay with offense. That's one scenario. The other is almost like the opposite of that, where say they have like a short range kind of weaponry, like maybe the sword and buckler, where they want to actually close ranks and get close enough, and they're able to sort of come in more aggressively than another person might be able to, because of the extra coverage, whether it's a shield or buckler or whatever. So yeah, curious like how you guys would kind of approach those couple of scenarios.
Shastar Vidya has a lot of basic entries, and the most basic is what they just call the surge. And this is essentially if I'm moving at, a constant speed, not even too fast, maybe somewhere between a walk and a jog, there is an ideal window of an attack which I can predict. And I know, because I know how far away you are, I can see roughly your weapon length, and I know you have a window of attack. And the skill is in being able to speed up without telling the opponent you're about to. Like if I walk up to you, get to that range, and then spring in, it's an exchange. If I'm walking and I change speed and you haven't noticed that I changed speed, and by the time you've noticed, you're not quite in the sweet spot anymore.
Right.
That's one of the main things they do.
Interesting. So sort of fine, subtle range control, effectively.
Yes, very subtle range control. I'm talking, back off the brakes a split second. And
the timing that matters.
The timing is totally off. It doesn't work nearly as well from staccato, from like standing still, but it does as you get better, in that you might start quite far out.
Oh, we're gonna get back to that.
Closer, then you get a little bit closer, and then my teacher does it, and it's like he can make it look like fencing, but when you try and get the timing on him, you realize that his timing is just extremely sharp. It's very fine tuned.
Would you say that flow is important to this?
It's the flow, and it's the it's really the mechanics that allow you to flow. That you can learn footwork to a certain degree, but if the physics don't support what you're trying to do, in that, a plane can slow down subtly because it's got, air brakes and whatever, and it's got ways of doing it. Whereas if you're pushing off the ground and you're mid-air, you can't really adjust that after that point. You've only got so much level of adjustment. And that mechanic that they talk about in Shastar Vidya is called spilling. And then there are different kind of levels to it where you learn how to...
Did you say spilling?
Spilling, they call it. And it's essentially how I like to think about it.
So it's like spilling a little bit as opposed to spilling a lot, or...
they just call it spilling, as you can move fast or slow.
Okay.
But it's more the mechanic of how you're moving. Okay. As opposed to, I'm on slippery ground, I've got armor on, I've got chainmail on, and I try and explode and push off the ground, where I might slip and I don't have a lot of control. It's more, how do I find this dynamic balance where the weight of my weapons, my helmet, my shoulders, all of this kind of stuff is, in a dynamic balance, almost like on a Segway, where I'm just moving forwards, and then I've got very fine control over speed and timing. And those are the two ways they do it. There's still some translation stuff in that. When I first went into HEMA, the range thing is like massively different at first, because Shastar Vidya is a little bit more... basically, you want to get in and stab the guy with a dagger. Your weapon is...
You want to get close.
You want to get very close and stab him with a dagger at the basic level. And if you are not doing that, it's usually, it's a cavalry sword. It's for hit and run kind of thing. It's not, I'm going to hit you and stay roughly in the same range.
Gotcha.
Thing. And
so either really get in or clip and get out.
Yeah. Or at very high level, they have dueling sports where they're doing the same thing, but to much more fine degree.
More back and forth, probably.
Yeah, more back and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
And like I say, it can look similar to fencing, but it feels very different. It's like, it's not so, bam, shit. He's hitting me like 3 meters out, where I would have thought that was uncomfortable. That's a little bit unsafe, because if you skimmed me, you're going to die like 3 seconds, like 3 moments afterwards kind of thing.
Right.
Or you're going to put yourself in like, you're going to, what they call breaking the line. They have this idea of like breaking formation, in that really my formation is where my body feels most comfortable. And if I can get into a fighting position from there and impose my presence on you, whether it be physically or like timing wise or whatever, there's a part of you that goes, oh, he's in a really solid position. And that's what I'm used to in Shastar Vidya. Whereas fencing is almost like you're so overextended, so like out of what I would consider safe, that it took a little while to adjust. But again, these come up in Shastar Vidya against spears and
and not to go too far down a tangent or whatever. Like I feel like this may be why the lunge was something which was a little bit of an innovation, where now when we're talking more of like a dueling situation, like you can afford to do these things that might be a little bit in a warfare situation considered a little bit more of an overcommitment, right? But now under those constraints of like, hey, I'm just dealing with one guy and it's the specific sort of context, that can make sense then. But then it's like, okay, well, before they were doing that, when we had to be able to do these kind of surging things, get in, get out, get close, whatever. Interesting that maybe that wasn't the standard or the typical set of mechanics. So going back to someone who's going to play these sort of like hit and run things where they're, using sniping or thrusting or whatever. So with the idea, how would you get in then?
So it's essentially about building redundancy in your entry.
Okay.
So it's like, I know there is a window of opportunity. And I could go in and say, I'm just going to...
Just going to go.
Just going to go. I could just surge in. I could maybe come in with an attack plan. Or I could say, I'm going to present a number of opportunities.
So
bait, but I don't want to say bait in... not like... It's not going to be that obvious. It's going to be subtle. It's going to be very subtle, and it's going to be like transient. And then I'm going to cover as much of those potentialities as I move in. So it's not like I think there's a hit coming here, then I block, and then it's more like I present, I cover, I present, I cover, and I do this smoothly as I'm moving in. And I do it in a way that's very deterministic. And that's not to say that there aren't, you can make mistakes.
Absolutely. But again, you saying
it's about redundancy.
There's redundancy.
It's redundancy. It's not like I block and I get the hit off and I win. It's like, no, I block, I messed it up. I blocked, I messed it up again, I messed it up, and I just run that. What Gurudev would say is like, he'd say, when you start off, you guys kind of walk together. Then you start getting a little bit better. You walk ahead. Eventually, you start meeting them there, and then the ideal goal is you just kind of forget they're there and you do what you know is safe to you. And don't pay too much attention to them, because that's how you get drawn into their games.
Don't play their game. Right. It's play. So sort of play the game that you're intending to play to the best of your ability, and once sort of like impose almost like reality on the opponent.
And also, just statistically, like if you think about combat, if you're training thousands of people, you really want just protocols. You want stuff that is deterministic. You don't really want to be like, okay, we're gonna get your thrusts up to a high level of skill, and I'm going to get your footwork to... It's more just like, here is the protocol. My teacher would say, like, follow the checklist. Follow the checklist. Kind of
I love that. I mean, from like a sports metaphor, like American football, there would be like specific plays, or even basketball, right?
Exactly.
So, and I would imagine those plays also have redundancy built in. Like if it doesn't work, how do you pivot so that you can try to get out and whatever? So do you feel like it's a similar answer for the other scenario that I was talking about?
Because what was it? Remind me.
I will in a second. So kind of wrapping out the scenario where someone is kind of sniping, keeping distance, in a weird way, like it's circling back to what I described at the beginning with the longsword. It sounds like you're kind of advocating for what I am already trying to do, which is I am trying to find those ways in. But like I shouldn't be expecting that it's necessarily going to be smooth sailing. Like I need to figure out ways to like come in. If it works, then to continue going forward. But then there's redundancy to get out if need be. So, but like I should try to like be minimizing the amount of damage I'm getting if that happens, and steadily, but just steadily making sort of net positive progress towards them until like I can really impose. Okay, like I fully have some control.
So, obviously I'm not a teacher in Shastar Vidya, I'm a student, but there's a number of things that my teacher likes to talk about. And first is not trying to deal with the person's attacks, but dealing more so with their intentions. In that, if I block your attack when you expect it to be blocked, and then I try and move to a next position and I move to the next position, you're pretty much in lockstep with me. But if I'm interpreting when you want to attack, and I'm not focusing my position on attacking you, I'm focusing it on making you feel uncomfortable. That creates a very slight window for me to like edge forwards. And then there's this second idea of he says about sort of staying in the shadow of the flame. It's like you want to be. There's a really good video actually on YouTube where there's a guy being chased by a bull, and he's saying it's just in front of his horns, but moving at like quite a constant rate, and the bull can't quite get its target, kind of thing. And it's a similar thing where he says you have to be comfortable being in that range where you're threatening with your intent, with your timing, with all of this stuff. But at the same time, you're not. It's unnerving because the moment you pause, or you
so
give
you've
anything
got to
away,
you got to be like riding that wave from like a surfer's perspective. Or
literally. Where you got, he would say you have to keep the opponent in two minds. They can't feel like attack. They got to feel shit. Let me shit. I've left it too long, kind of thing. And then slowly that goes from a second to half a second to a quarter of a second to a tenth of a second. But it's always happening.
I love that. I love that. And again, I think coming from like 20 plus years of kind of martial arts, I know that feeling. Like I've experienced that in any number of sort of different martial arts, and it's hard to be specific, but like understanding when you're winning, understanding where you're winning is kind of the important thing. And winning does not necessarily mean hitting the other person. It means like sort of getting them to do what you want them to do, right? That I think is kind of the way I think of that.
So one of the ways he would push me and stuff in training, is they'd really focus on how much you step back. This was a massive thing. That took a while, because in most scenarios, just if you think of the combat loop, it's I go forwards, I fuck up, I step back, I go forwards, I mess up, I step back. Whereas this is more like you step back, 1 point kind of off, go again, start getting fucked up, kind of thing. Like you can press, you can change angle, you can move forward, you can slow down.
I love that.
You can take half a step back, but if you take a full step or you stumble, it doesn't matter what happens. That is considered the bigger failure. Like even if you manage to get your hit off or whatever,
super interesting.
Because then what happens essentially is you create. Well, at least this is my understanding. Is you create an environment where it's not so much your skill or how good you look on the bag, so to speak. It's your ability to adapt smoothly. And it's a subtle difference, but there's adapting. I'm just quick and I'm strong enough and fast enough. I managed to adapt, and I'm adapting very smoothly because my footwork has been trained in such a way that where I don't stumble. I don't step back. I just reposition all the time, and I make it very, very awkward for you. And it
so feels like lateral motion, sideways motion, or rotational motion.
Not rotation, less so. I like to think of it more like a plane, like it's like yawing and drifting and kind of thing, where it's a bit more. But like a fish, I guess.
Sure, but not purely straightforward.
No.
That's we're missing opportunities there. I had a thought about that. But yeah. I really like what you said about like if you're going straight backward as part of your sort of like retreat or defense, to actually say that that's a failure, that like we're gonna count that as an actual failure. I mean, I just think about so many like typical HEMA fights. Like there's when people are put under pressure, the easiest, most natural thing to do is to go straight back. And again, that depending on the goal, like if we're talking about like say a HEMA competitive rule set, there's nothing penalizing people for doing that. And I find it very interesting that that could be a really interesting approach where it's not about the hit, it's about kind of like who is not dominating nearly as much as it's totally. Almost like who can take the center of the ring, right? Like that kind of situation too.
Sometimes it'd be described as like tigers, they position, and if one of them gets the worst position, they just back down. It's like we could go and kill each other, but then we can't get better. You've lost kind of thing. So there's this.
I even feel like there's a little bit of a pop culture reference, but I feel like there was like a scene like that in like Seven Samurai, I think, where like the two guys. So they both cut, and then
the other guy's like, he's better than me.
He won. And then later on, I think like there was somebody who was the audience, and they're like, I don't see it, I don't get it. And then later on in the movie, Like they do the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to do it for real this time. And like, you know, the guy happens to do it while he's offline.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, oh, that's why he's winning. Because that guy's dead.
The last workshop we've done, he done a similar sort of thing. He called it, it was like jousting kind of thing.
Sure. Okay.
Where you run in, but we recorded it in slow-mo.
Right.
And we just basically hit past each other. And you see what it looks like side on. And in every single clip, Gurudev is like very like much in his posture. He's comfortably like, you know, in your eyes kind of thing. You're like slightly overextended. You can tell from the freeze frame that you've timed it off. But every full speed, it's very difficult to tell. And this is the kind of stuff where I say you have to start from doing it slowly and build up, and then you get a sensitivity. But on the surface, it might just look like fencing. It might just look like he's just done this. But you slow it down, and you're like, oh damn, this guy's timing and posture.
And
is so spot on.
Anytime it's these kind of like advantages that you get on somebody that are subtle and hard to see. Just imagine the effect of like sort of like piling them on, like in sort of a battlefield context. Like this person would basically look like he's just breaking through the rank. Over and over. Like how are they getting through? I mean, you know, like another thing that as a metaphor. Again, I go back to sort of American football since there's a lot of that driving kind of thing, and just like some of the things that people are able to do to just kind of break through all of those things. There's a lot of that. Again, I'm not a football person at all, but like I can see where hitting people at slightly an off angle, so that like, you know, it's not, you know, energy that gets like transmitted directly into you to slow you down, but all of a sudden gets kind of bounced off of you.
And also sensitivity to structural pressure is a big one that I had to get comfortable with, because, you know, in boxing you cover up. You just take a few blows and throw some back. It's no big deal.
Right.
As soon as you do anything where the person is just intent on pushing you back, and you realize that your structure is solid, you know, you've met him, the timing's quite good, but you're maybe an inch out of alignment. He's got very slight alignment on you. You know that once you clash, you're going to fall backwards. And getting a sensitivity to that, again, it adds a different dynamic to the combat, because you're doing the exact same movement, but you have a sensitivity that you don't have if you just aim to hit the guy, kind of thing.
So you made me think of a really interesting thing that I'd like to explore next. Before we wrap this one, though, that situation where someone is really good, like their sweet spot is to actually come in, say with a shield and a short sword of some sort. How would you guys deal with, again, would this be sort of like the surging, let them come forward and then kind of like redirect them somehow so that you're winning the position then, or? It
depends on how they fight, to be fair. But generally the principles don't change. You're either surging in, you're either controlling the range, or you're letting them come in and then you're going in. But the main difference, I guess, with
Vorknock Indes for the German people.
It's like,
it's initiative.
That's like the most basic way they explain it. It's just the level of skill really comes in how much you can control the intention.
I love that.
And that we can do I'll do some simple drills with you maybe later.
Sure.
Where you get someone to run in and touch your chest, and then you try and touch them at the same time as they touch your chest. Then you say, can I touch you slightly before that? Then can I touch you as your elbow raises? Can I touch you? And then you start getting this, I know, a calibration almost too. I know roughly when you want to hit, and I'm going to fight just that.
Right.
And then it becomes like you go in and I've paused and you've gone, and you've overextended, and you know before the exchange has happened that you've messed it up. And you see this in basketball, football, you know, rugby, where it's like, you know, immediately that you fucked it. You're like, I've gone like, but from the outside, it might just look like, oh, he's given up.
Kind of why did he do something?
It's like, dude, he had a dagger and he was pointing at my neck. And like, you know, it's like, we could have ran it through, but at the end of the day, what you trying to learn it, essentially. You know?
And again, like, I think, again, there's this layer of interpretation of like someone who doesn't really understand what they're looking for. It's almost like, or what they're looking at, it's almost like the person who's losing in that situation looks kind of stupid, right? Like, it's like, why did you do that? And it's not a statement on that person's lack of skill. It is a statement on the person who's executing the highly skilled thing. They've set it up. They've set it up so it wasn't just like, I just happened to disarm myself.
And it's a case of aim. It's like sometimes people look at footwork drills and forget that they're footwork drills. They're like judging it, going, "Oh, this wouldn't work on that." I'm like, dude, I'm practicing the combat equivalent of running through cones. I'm letting someone put pressure on me, and I'm not trying to fight back. I'm just seeing if I can actually keep up and not stumble and not like overstep, or can I hold my posture? Can I basically create a very good vehicle and keep it on the road, so to speak?
Absolutely.
Which sounds like a simple task, but now you imagine you stack some armor on you stack some like chainmail, you got to like ride horses, you got to do this running, you got to do a bunch of stuff. Suddenly, your ability to maneuver becomes quite paramount, especially if you've got to work as a team.
Right.
Whereas your ability to hit is kind of like, you know, a dagger is a dagger is a dagger.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Again, like boiling this down to basic principles that are not, it's this specific weapon or this specific kind of mechanical footwork or whatever, I think is, I think this is, for me, as someone who's done martial arts for a long time, is really helpful to know what level to kind of boil things down to. So it's not too specific, but it's not so vague that it's just general philosophy. So, all right. So I think I have a good thing to kind of pivot to. So we'll talk next about that.
Okay, cool.